Everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation, and I've got back to the channel Melissa Nee from Metal Chat. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for having me on the show.
Fantastic. We are going to do a show on bands that are live that are not as good on record and bands on record that are not as good live or maybe the same. We are going to pick five bands and compare the live experience with the record or in the studio experience, and we'll take it from there. So, Melissa, why don't you? We're not going to, it's not a ranking in any order. We're just going to pick five bands. Pick a band that
So,
maybe the live experience is better than the studio experience.
well, we were actually just off air talking about this band, and I was talking about this band with my friend Tim because I was telling him I was going to be on the show and what the premise was, and we both had the same idea. And I'm going with Blue Oyster Cult. So I love Blue Oyster Cult, and the show that you did, where you picked Cultosaurus as your favorite, is also my favorite. Although I can make an argument for Fire, but that's a whole nother show. But the thing about BOC is, as great as they are on record, it's live. They're so much heavier live. They just seem to, they're not like a different band, but they're just like, for me, I think, and this is what my friend was saying as well, they're just like a next level. They're fine to listen to. They're perfectly serviceable records, as you know. They're great records, but there's just something about them live. They're heavier. They're just more energetic. It's just I think that if you listen to Blue Oyster Cult, they're not really a metal band, right? But they're a non-metal band that metalheads love. But if you see them live, they definitely have that more of that metal uh, vibe. They obviously toured with Black Sabbath, which a lot of people thought that was a little bit of an odd combination, but it really isn't if you see them live. Have you ever seen them live?
Yes, I have. They toured once in Australia. Can you believe it? You know, a band with such an extensive career only came to Australia once, and they supported the Hoodoo Gurus. Hoodoo Gurus are like a garage psych band, Australian rock legends. And for a couple of years, they did an invitational where they'd invite all these bands that they like and really dig. They put an invitation of Blue Oyster Cult, and they came out, and Blue Oyster Cult did a 75 to 90-minute set. First time I ever saw them, I was blown away. They were great.
Do you agree? Do you think they're heavier live?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I've got all the live albums, and
Yeah.
seeing them live, I think it's the Buck Dharma element. He's electric. He is such
He
an
is.
underrated guitar player. And the way he's evolved from somebody that was very subtle and just doing all these little guitar licks, which was made for classic rock radio or video, and evolved into kind of keeping up with the Joneses in the 80s and, a little bit of a shredder, had that little bit of element. He is such a diverse guitarist, and I think the heaviness comes from him. Also, there's a little bit of that boogie piano. I think because a lot of people like their live albums because there's a more of a jam element. They see where the song will lead. Where on the album, it's very sort of controlled. It's 4 minutes, 5 minutes. And look, I'll tell you, their albums are fantastic, but it's the live
Absolutely.
experience
It is.
where it's
I think
at. And, they sort of jam and you don't know what direction the song's going to, where the song's going to go. There's certainly a band where they don't go into that sort of element where it's very structured and you're going to see the same performance night after night after night. And to think they were on a tour with Black Sabbath and held their own. I did an interview with Joe, and he said that basically the crowds that saw them in Black Sabbath grooved on both. So there
right. No,
wasn't
absolutely. But
there wasn't a
yeah,
BOC crowd or a Black Sabbath crowd. Both
no,
both crowds loved
absolutely.
them. So
Absolutely.
yeah. And that was right in the peak of Black Sabbath heaviness, like with your Heaven and Hell and Ronnie James Dio.
Yes.
So Folks, if you get an opportunity to watch on YouTube or get a bootleg, because it's never been official, because Tony Iommi doesn't want it out, but it should come out, is the Black and Blue tour, the film. They did a film of it. It's just
Yes, they
wonderful.
did.
And you can see Blue Oyster Cult in all their glory. So I
Yeah,
agree with you.
yes, yeah. So that's my first.
As much as the studio albums are
Yeah,
fantastic, the
yeah. I mean,
live is where it's
yeah,
at.
absolutely. But I think live is just the next level for
Yep,
them.
yep, absolutely. All right. Well, maybe I'm going to do a counterpoint to bands that I believe are better in the studio than live. And the one I'm going to do is Rat. Now, I've seen Rat a number of times, and I think that the reason why they were so good in the studio is that you had a great guitar songwriting um, duo of Warren DeMartini and Robin Crosby. And you also had the wonderful producer, Beau Hill. He was like the brains behind those first two albums. So, Out of the Cellar and Invasion of Your Privacy. The thing I think that sort of detracts from the live experience is the singer, Stephen Pearcy. Vocally, he's a bit hit and miss, and more miss than hit. I've seen him a few times, and there is a pitch problem. There can be sort of sometimes he doesn't seem enthusiastic. I mean, musically, they're on fire. They're really gelled, and there's a synergy there, but there seems to be a disconnect with him. I'm sure that there are performances that he's on fire as well, but I'm just relating it to the times that I've seen it that he's been a little bit of a miss. Have you seen? I'm sure that you've seen Rat a
So
few times.
it's funny that because they're actually on my list. So the thing about Rat, after those first two albums, I kind of checked out. I kind of, well, they were around, and I used to always go see them. They played with Bon Jovi and Poison, in the later '80s and whatnot. And so I've seen them many many times. But for me, I agree. The weakest link in that band is absolutely Steven. I don't really like his voice that much, and I like it even less live.
Yeah.
So that is 100%. I'm 100% with you on that. I mean, I think that Warren and Robin are the stars of that show, and I think that when you go and see them live, they prove that they're the stars of that band. Yeah, I 100%. I think that he absolutely detracts from them, and I and
Yeah.
and, and I think there's probably some, you know, obviously there's some studio trickery, right, to make him sound better. Um, I have a few people on my list that fall into that category that are better on record because, you know, they've been cleaned up.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I think he's fine on record. He has that sort of Alice Cooper snarly tone, and it sort of works okay within the dynamics of the songs. It actually adds a little bit of energy and a bit of grit. But live, the times that I've seen him, oh wowzer! It's sort of like it's cut through, but it's in the wrong way. Cut through. It's sort of like oh, and it sort of detracts you from the musician from who he's got behind in the on the back line. And it's only after a while, maybe a few beers, you know, you get used to it, and okay, you're getting into the groove, and you're
Yeah,
sort of enjoying it for what it is, but it does detract. And I just think those first couple of albums where you had a very savvy producer, had all the tools, and was able to get the right energy. And look, Round and Round is still gets placed on classic rock
absolutely.
radio.
That's a great
It,
song.
it's a song that is perfect pop metal, and it's going to last generations for no, you know, and a lot of it's to do with the Beau Hill production. He put all the elements together and made something that was perfect for that time that transcends. Yeah, look, I just think this is one band. Well, isn't it funny? There's never been an official live album come out with Rat.
Yeah, and that's probably a good thing.
Yeah. But I've seen a few bootlegs. I've been tempted. I've been at record fairs, Mel, and I've picked it up and I go, well, maybe not. Just put it down. But one day I'll get it.
Yeah, if they're cheap enough, you might be able to.
Yeah.
You buy something else, you maybe they'll throw one in. They'll
Yeah.
throw a rat bootleg in for you.
All right. What's your next one?
All right. So the next one, let's see. So kind of on the same in the same genre, a band that is really good live, and this kind of goes back to the same kind of on the BOC thing, and that is the band Warrant. So I never really liked them or disliked them. They were just kind of there. I owned their first album. I actually won it in a trivia contest. I thought it was fine. I'm not a massive glammy hair metal person, but I was like, yeah, they're good. Janie Lane has a great voice. But then I saw them live and I was like, wow, they're actually really talented. And I've seen them a few times in the 80s and once in the early 90s. And I've only seen them with Janie. And for me, I mean, he's obviously the chief songwriter and the front man and whatnot. And they're really a good band. And they're a better band than I think people think they are, who just saw the idiotic videos on MTV and didn't, you know what I mean? And didn't really take the time to sort of maybe go see them live or delve a little bit more into them because they're actually a better band than you might think they are.
That's a whole different category topic. Bands that are better than you, perhaps they're being given credit for. The imaging. Look,
Yeah.
if you think hair metal, Warren would have to be right at the top because they're so attached to that label. Through the
But you know what though? But so like the albums, like we were talking about Rat being sort of poppy, right? But
mm,
Warrant was kind of the same thing. But when you saw them live, they were heavier.
mm,
They were
yeah,
they were heavier than you would think.
yeah,
The songs were sped up and there was, shredding going on. And
mm,
yeah, I mean, I thought they were a much heavier band and a much better band live than, and I never listened to them on stereo or whatever. I never really did. But every time they came around, I went to see them because I knew they were a really, really solid band live.
and there was also a tabloid element to this band as well because of the excesses of Jenny
Yep.
Lane,
Yeah.
which kind of sort of tainted their legacy a little bit. But look, I'll be honest, I'm not really familiar with a lot of the works of that band. But yeah, I've been tempted to pick up Dog Eat Dog. A lot of folk say that's probably their strongest album.
It
So
is,
it's
I
on my
think.
checklist. I'll
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
give that a
But I
bit of
just
a
think it's
listen.
there, but there is definitely like I think there is a lot more to them. I mean, now
Yeah.
sadly Janie's gone. They tour now they've got a different lead singer and whatnot, but for me I wasn't that big of a fan that I needed to go
Mm,
see them now, you know what I mean? But
yeah.
like I said, I really did enjoy them live and they were a band that I didn't sit around the house listening to. I mean, obviously I heard them on the radio when I saw them on MTV and all that. But definitely, I mean, they were never like a massive, I mean, they played, I think the biggest venue I ever saw them play was when they played with Poison. When was that,
Mm,
88? I think that was. But normally they were like a club theater band. You know what I
mm.
mean? And so, the prices were reasonable and you'd go and have a great time and they were a really good band live. They were a solid band live.
All right. Um, my next pick is a band that I think are better live than on record. But even though a lot of their studio albums are like the holy scrolls of hard rock, and I'm talking about AC/DC. I think AC/DC, obviously, I was too young for the Bon Scott era, but the videos, the live albums, the movies that I've seen, he seemed to be the man. He was very charismatic, and they were one of those bands where Angus just went off, and they just went bonkers. They were just so much energy. They just were scene stealers. You compare it to those, even though like the Vanda and Young albums of the 70s had a lot of energy and it was kind of rough and ready and a bit garagey, um, live was where it was at. Go to the 90s where you got Brian. I find a lot of the studio recordings are a little bit clinical, a bit sterile. Now, Back in Black is a great album. It's probably a masterclass in production. You've got the Mutt Lane production. It's so crisp. every note is in the right place. He's really refined AC/DC for the radio masses. But I think when they went into the later 80s and the 90s, it became a little bit clinical. And I've seen the stadium tour of AC/DC, and wow, they're just fantastic live. They're just, Angus is the star of the show. They're rambunctious. They're, any adjective you want to throw, they just pop out comparative to the albums that are a little bit more, I hate to use the word, but a little bit more sterile. What do you think?
Well, it's an interesting take because, I mean, yeah, they have listen, AC/DC has a formula and they follow the formula from album to album to album to album to album. The thing about, I mean, sometimes Brian's voice live can be iffy, because he's got that sort of weird raspy thing going on. And in the last few times that I've seen them, he's been pitchy and that kind of stuff. But you are 100% correct about the vibe. So even if his vocals are not what you hear on the album or what you expect him to be, there's still it's not so much about him singing, his voice singing it, it's about his persona singing it. Do you know what I'm trying to say? But yeah, I mean, I'm not old enough for Bon Scott either, sadly. I didn't get to see him either. But yeah, I mean, that's a whole different animal. I mean, yeah, him live. Oh my God. I would love to have seen that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you were saying about Brian and the pitch, it's not like Stephen Pearcy in the pitch where it's like, it's sort of a little bit, you can hear it, but you live with it because it's the vibe and all part of the package, and it's forgivable because, like, let's face it, like rock and roll, you don't have to have the best voice.
No, I mean,
I love punk, I love new wave, and it's about having personality,
exactly,
and selling it. And I think there's a forgiveness level if there's a little bit here and there. So
right, and you don't want. I mean, if you want it to sound just like the album, then save $50 or now $150 and stay home and listen to the album. I mean, when you go live, I mean, the idea is that it's going to be warts and all. That's why you don't want to hear somebody doing backing tracks and somebody, it being all sterilized, because otherwise you can just stay home for that. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Concert tickets are too expensive these days for you to be, spending, dropping $200 to have to listen to basically the album that you could listen to at home.
Yeah, it's almost mortgage prices for some concert tickets.
Awful.
I'm not going to go there. A little bit.
That's a whole nother show.
I know. Hey, a little bit of interesting trivia. In the 70s, when AC/DC were just starting out, I've heard stories that folk, when they used to have school dances, this is in the 70s, AC/DC used to play school dances.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I mean,
could you imagine that? Telling your grandkids about that. I saw Bon Scott or I saw AC/DC. They played my school dance. Times were different in those days.
Yeah. I mean, they were playing proms and all kinds of. Aerosmith did the same thing. They used to play in the gymnasiums around here in Massachusetts. I mean, that was their very first gig was in a gymnasium at Mendon High School here in Massachusetts. I mean, that's how everybody kind of got their start. And so, yeah, you do a prom, or you would do, Van Halen used to do, house parties and things like that. Can you imagine you just going to a pool party with a 6-pack and then, there's Eddie Van Halen shredding by the pool.
I don't know. I don't know how many people would have been into the music or more into the girls and what was happening in the scene. The band would be like in those teenage
the background.
They're in the background and sort of, it's a bit annoying. And then you realize, that was Van Halen.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's Van Halen before they're Van Halen, right?
Yeah, Van Halen. All right. What's your next one?
Well, speaking of Van Halen, so Van Halen is on the same vein as AC/DC. So Van Halen is great on record, but they were back in the day with David Lee Roth. They were amazing live. And David Lee Roth is not the best singer. He's not the best singer live. He was pitchy and sometimes he'd mumble the words and, so on and so forth. But he was so entertaining that it didn't matter. I mean, besides the fact that you have the people that you have, behind him on the stage, you have Michael Anthony's great, who has a great voice, who's doing the backing vocals, who's fantastic, and then you have, of course, Alex and Eddie. But, like the show is so entertaining that it's okay if it doesn't sound exactly like doesn't sound as good as the album. But their albums, Ted Templeman, of course, famously, produced them, and so you got a really high quality production from their albums. But there's something about seeing them live, that's just a different, is just exciting. And even, I mean, Sammy Hagar with them was great as well, because Sammy Hagar is a high energy guy, and his voice live, I think, is actually better than David Lee Roth's, you know, vocally, you know what I mean? But he wasn't as entertaining as Dave. Dave is always very entertaining. So that's a band that great on record, but man, back in the day, a must attend concert live.
Well, I think that the debut or the first couple of albums sound absolutely spick on record, and unfortunately, Australia didn't really see Van Halen until much
Yeah.
later. Gary Sharon was the first time Van Halen had passed our shores. We got the David Lee Roth experience in '86, which was good, the solo, but we finally got three-quarters of the original band for a festival. I think it was about 15 years, or just around the time of A Different Kind of Truth. No Anthony on bass. It was his son. But look, David Lee Roth, I can live with that, because he's kind of Vegas. He's a Vegas showman.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean,
Sort
that's,
of like
you just kind of like,
shooby-dooby. Yeah, I live with that. I like it. It's part of his
me too, but it's
shtick. Yeah,
exactly. So, I mean, but it's different than, the album. You listen to the album and and like you
yeah.
said, they're pristine and they're
Mm.
dynamite. But it's the live experience, even though it's not, you know,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if there was no David Lee Roth and that Razzmatazz, would have basically, you wouldn't have had Vince Neil. You would have, I'm going down the list. You would have,
yeah,
he would have had all these bastard sons, as he kind of puts it. Um, would have killed a whole genre
absolutely.
if he wasn't around. But yeah, it's a good pick. I'm going to talk about a band that I rate same, same. Iron Maiden, live, on record, love them both.
That's on my list as same as well.
Same, same.
Same.
We
I
can
mean,
talk about it. Let's talk about it. Just you and I.
so
Hmm.
the thing of obviously, full disclosure, they're my favorites. But the thing about it is that they deliver live, they deliver it musically, they deliver it visually, and they're also entertaining. So it's like the trifecta, right? They got the audio, the visual, and just the entertainment factor of, because Bruce is such a great front man. So you've got the trifecta going on. And then, yeah, I mean, the albums are awesome. So yeah, I mean, that's on my list as same as well. That's something that I think that they are able to translate. Now, I have a little bit of issues with, I have seen them live a few times, and they sometimes they speed up the songs, and sometimes it's a little bit frustrating to listen to Bruce trying to keep up with the music in the background, and a fine example of this is, of course, the Live After Death. When they do Hallowed, it's sped up, which is a little bit annoying to me, and but I can absolutely live with it.
There's another
That's my
show
only gripe.
topic in this, Mel, about bands who speed up their songs in concert. There's a whole raft of it, isn't it? Think of how many albums. Like one of my favorites is Richie Blackmore's Rainbow. Man on the Silver Mountain, on the first Richie Blackmore's Rainbow, is kind of a bit sedate, bit laid back, and live it's like really sped up. And I'm
Yes.
thinking there's so many bands that I don't know if it's the excitement of the crowd but they sort of get a little bit of juice in the tank and they speed it up.
Yeah, or they're just trying to, we got X amount of time to cram in all these songs. I mean, because, Iron Maiden has so many long songs. I don't know what it is, but yeah, I mean, that's my big gripe with them is, or not such a
Yep.
big gripe, but it's just, and you can hear it on the live albums, and then of course you can hear it live.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think we both agree. I think it's the energy levels. There's energy on the albums and there's energy live. Therefore, I put it as an equal sign. I think they're the same.
Me too.
So,
Me too.
well, I inadvertently took one of your picks, so I'll throw it over to you. You lead. Come up with another one.
So, let me look at my little list here. So I talked about, a band that I thought wasn't very entertaining live. And I've been on, I think we've already talked about, well, we talked about the Cars on another show that I did, about how they were much better on record than they were live. And another band that I thought wasn't that great live was Nirvana. I thought they sounded much better on record. Whatever it was, the angst, whatever it was that they had, it didn't seem to translate. To me, it just translated to kind of like boredom. And maybe that was the whole shtick. Maybe that was what they were going for. The I don't care, I'm bored, anti-rock star, whatever. But it just didn't make for a very exciting evening. It was fine. I mean, they did the songs. It's not, you got to see them. That was, it's fine. I mean, I never have a bad time at a live show, but they weren't that entertaining live. Not they certainly didn't translate what you got on the albums live for me.
Yeah. I don't think I'm going to pretend to sort of criticize or give an appraisal for a band like Nirvana or grunge because it's a different genre of music where there's sort of an element of, I wouldn't call it anti-entertainment, but it was kind of a reaction to all the gliss and the glitter of what was going in rock prior. It was more of, I think it was kind of a reactionary type of movement, and it was very much of more about the music, more within ourselves. Let's be a little bit more introverted. Like a lot of the music in the 80s was extroverted and projecting to the audience, whereas grunge and that movement was more of within ourselves. We're in a bubble on the stage and just observe us. It's really hard.
But you know what? I do understand what you're trying to say, but I have to tell you, I saw Pearl Jam early on in that same time, and they were unbelievable. I mean, Eddie was like stage diving. He was climbing the rafters and he was all over the place. I mean, he was running around. He was clearly energetic. Soundgarden, same thing. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess that was Kurt's whole sort of, I don't want to say shtick, but kind of like his whole vibe was just, like you say, the anti-rock star. We're not going to dress up. We're not going to put on makeup, or we're not going to put on fancy clothes, or we're not even going to comb our hair or whatever. We're just going to, and I get that was kind of their whole vibe, but it was just kind of like, and maybe it's because I'm older and I come from the 80s that I was just kind of like, okay, this is it. Like there was nothing. And it's okay that you don't have to be Iron Maiden. You don't have to have, all the bells and whistles or whatever. We will talk about another band I have another band on my list that I consider same, that doesn't do that, doesn't do the bells and whistles. So it's not about that. It was just, I don't know. I saw them twice, and yeah. And I've seen Foo Fighters, and Dave Grohl is a much better frontman than Kurt Cobain was, I think. I don't know, that's probably sacrilege, right, for me to say that, but
look, I think that there's different sort of genres. It's like I get myself into lots of trouble with this channel. Sometimes you lose subs because I like all different types of rock music. And you've got a lot of folk that just love metal, they just love punk, they love new wave, and never the twain meet. And I think that good music is good music. And it's like putting a different pair of clothes and you go to that concert experience and you enjoy it for what it is. I think in relation to this show is that is it as good live as it is on the record? Is there the commitment? Is there the passion? Is there the musicology there? And I think that's how you relate it to the different genres of music. And, there's bad metal, there's bad grunge, and
Uh,
there's good metal and there's good grunge.
Absolutely.
It's not a reflection on the genre per se. So I think when I was saying about the grunge and being sort of introverted and being in bubble, yeah, that doesn't explain all of grunge because there was definitely an element of grunge where they were very extroverted and getting out there, and you see these famous shots of Eddie Vedder being crowd surfing, etc.,
Yeah,
etc.
yeah, he
In the
was all over
Soundgarden,
the place.
but then you have some other grunge folk where they've just got the just staring at the shoes and looking at
Yeah.
looking at the wah wah pedal,
And maybe I mean it could just be shyness and stage fright, and like I
Mm,
said, I mean it's not a personal affront. It was just kind of like eh. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
and again, maybe, it was fine. I mean, I saw them twice, so, and I probably would have continued to see them, had they continued. I saw them both times I had an opportunity to see them. So the first time that I saw them, it didn't deter me from not wanting to see them again. It
yeah,
just was a very, um, I think it was just, I mean, the early 90s. So it was a very different experience, I think, than what I had sort of
yeah.
previously been used to. But yeah.
Well, I think they definitely appealed to an audience. They touched something, it was lightning in a bottle because to an audience that felt disenfranchised. Perhaps they didn't like the hair metal, they didn't like what was in the on the charts, they didn't like what was in the music, and it was a lot darker, and you know, it definitely picked up an audience that was probably
Oh, it
bubbling under
definitely
for quite
did.
some time. And,
Yeah.
maybe, the blokes that like their a little bit of rock crunch in their music that were dragged to Great White concerts or Poison concerts, they finally found some sort of music that had a bit of crunch that appealed to them and it was for them. So I don't know. It's just a theory. All right. I'm going to talk about an Australian band called Angels or Angel City. Did you ever see them, Mel?
I never saw them, but I knew them as Angel City.
Yeah, very legendary. They influenced a lot of bands like sort of Guns N' Roses. They were one of the best live acts I've ever seen. They had a charismatic frontman called Doc Neeson. And definitely, this is a band that treaded the boards of what you call pub rock. Even as they sort of built up an audience, they would play theatres and concert halls. And, they had no bells and whistles. It'd be dark lighting, minimal lighting. And the focus was basically on the music and the frontman, Doc Neeson. He was like a combination of Iggy Pop. Yeah, he was just like a madman. He was just so charismatic, and the songs had that sort of AC/DC rock crunch. They were part of the Vanda and Young stable, but live is where it was at because it was an interaction between the crowd and the band. I've never seen such an emotional connection in a lot of bands. I mean, there are only very few bands that I've seen, in my gig going career where there is that sort of communion, and this was one of them. And they always seem to have that energy live that was kind of missing on the albums. A lot of the 70s albums in the Vanda and Young were very sort of kind of very stripped back, and maybe there was that element that it wasn't quite as organic live as it was, in the studio.
Mhm.
Anyway, they should have been much bigger in America. They had a couple of nibbles at, doing a tour. I think they toured with Triumph on the West Coast, and that was an absolute disaster. They
Yeah,
um, they
heard that.
toured with the Kinks in the early 80s, got standing ovations at Madison Square Gardens, and the Kinks booted them off because they were getting too much attention. So it's just one of those bands that should have been much bigger, but due to some various sort of, you know, poor
Bad luck, and
bad
yeah,
luck and circumstances, it just didn't come through. So
that's too bad. That's too bad because
yeah,
I've heard quite a bit about them, that they were a really good band. They're a really
absolutely.
fun band. Like, yeah.
All right, what's you got another one?
Let's see what else. Oh, so um, this isn't even really a band. This is more like a genre, I guess, that is better live, and that is the jam bands. Your Fish, your Grateful Dead. Um, I don't know too many people who actually sit around the house listening to them. Again, they're bands that you go and see live. Um, you'll hear them do an album, do a song on an album, and then you see them do it live, and it obviously they extend it for the next 20 minutes. You know what I mean? But I mean, a part of that is the whole vibe of it all, especially the Grateful Dead. You know, people traveled around to see them, and there were drugs involved, and everybody was having a good time, and that whole sort of thing. But it was just something about them that doesn't really. They're fine on album, on record, but it's really the live experience is where it is for not only just the Grateful Dead, but I think the whole jam band, widespread panic, and all the jam band genre, if you will, just really lends itself more to live than it does to recorded.
Yeah, I agree. I a couple of weeks ago saw a band called the Almond Betts Band. I don't know if you heard of him, but it's the son of some
Yep.
of the folk from the Allman Brothers. I said Allman Brothers, Allman Betts Band. And there was one song they played for 30 minutes.
They just
Like,
on, and
keep
you're
on
like, oh,
going,
okay, I'm
and
gonna
they
go get a
go from.
beer. I'm gonna go to the bathroom. I'm gonna come back to still playing the same
And
song.
I looked at my mate and I said, the show was supposed. The show started at what did it? 9 o'clock. It finished at midnight or something like that. But it was just like
Wow.
6, 7 songs in the whole show. But it was like an all-star jam, and everyone would be doing a solo and be throwing
Yeah,
to one person, and everyone's having a ball. You know,
yeah, yeah,
it's that's definitely
yeah.
live.
Yeah, and that's that whole jam band vibe thing
Yep.
that it just doesn't really translate. It doesn't
Mm,
really seem to translate on record. Obviously, they
yep.
can't do one song for 30 minutes on, on an album. They
Abs-
have to trim it in. But yeah, I mean, I just feel like those are the type of bands that you go to see live, sit around the house listening to them.
Absolutely. I mean, that Allman Brothers live album is the one that I think if anyone wants to buy an essential album is the one that they go to. And, you
Absolutely.
know, I think I've seen versions. There's been a double version, a triple album version, bonus cuts. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
live is where it's at.
absolutely.
Mel, I'm going to bring into the conversation something's a little bit sad. I'll segue it in about the topic of bands late in their career where the vocalist or maybe one of the band members, their capabilities are kind of waning. And obviously, there is a difference between the live experience and what's on record. Now, with studios and AI and a lot of studio trickery, you can make somebody whose vocal capabilities have diminished sound decent and acceptable, and you can paper around it. I'll be honest, Whitesnake, David Coverdale, he's one of my favorite vocalists of all time. But you've got to, I mean, seeing some of the later David Coverdale concerts around the Flesh and Blood tour, his vocal capabilities were shot. He just,
Don
he just
Dokken, same.
doesn't have that vocal
Nope.
capability. But on the album, even though you know he's in a deeper sort of vocal range, whether it's studio trickery or production or doing a lower key, it's acceptable and it's decent because you kind of listen to it and you think, oh, he's doing kind of a Rod Stewart, that sort of raspy tone, and you can get away with it. But live, not so much.
Same thing with Don Dokken. You know, like that new Dokken album that came out, it's really good. Now, it doesn't sound like Don Dokken from 1987, but it sounds really good. but I know people that saw live and were just like, yeah, his voice is gone. I mean, I will say this in closing. I will say that for me, live is always better, is always where it's at,
Yes.
warts and all. Um, you know, it doesn't, I mean, I'm not a Motley Crue fan, but if you're a Motley Crue fan and you want to go see Motley Crue and enjoy that, great. And Kiss, I saw Kiss, and it's produced and all of that kind of stuff. We had a blast. It's just live is just, it's not just the performance, it's the whole package. But it's also about hanging out with your friends, having a few beers, a night out, a night away from the kids, or a night off of work.
Mhm.
Or if you've traveled, to it's part of your holiday or whatever it is, and then you go to this show and it's sonically entertaining and it's visually entertaining, and and you're just having a good time, and for me, the live experience is the whole package of it, and that's why I love live music so much. And I own a lot of records and albums, and I listen to a lot of music, so I keep buying physical media, so it's not like I'm choosing one over the other, but I do love, 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 love live music. Warts and all.
Absolutely. All right, tell us where we can find you, Mel, and any
So,
shows coming up.
yeah, so I just dropped an episode that I did a joint venture that my show called Metal Chat with Melissa podcast. I did a joint venture with Feckin' Metal out of Ireland. My friend Fergal and I talk about a band called Sortilege. I don't know if you're familiar with them. If your viewers are familiar with them, they are a French heavy metal band. They go back from the 80s, and they are an amazing band, another band that should have been bigger than they were. And we did a nice little show about them. And then I am getting ready to drop an episode that I did where I'm recapping Hell's Heroes, which was a festival that I went to in Houston, Texas a couple weeks ago. So got all that going on. So you can find me Metal Chat with Melissa. I'm on all the places where you find your podcasts.
Absolutely, and I'll put the www, all the linkages on
All
this
the links
show.
in there. Thank you so much for having me. I love coming on your show and having
Yeah,
it's always such a great time. And we could just
abs-
talk for hours and hours and hours and
we
hours.
we could, and we'll do something. We'll over the next couple of weeks we'll conjure another topic. But no, I really enjoyed doing that today, and yeah, we'll do something very very soon. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Tell us what you think. Tell us what bands you think were better live than on studio, or better studio or live, or equal, or same. But one thing's for sure, there'll be plenty of Rock Daydream Nation in 2024. See you later. Cheers.